Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'm going to do today, I will talk about the foundation of carbon accounting. So far you've seen different things, right? As part of Net Zero Cloud, for instance, how to allocate carbon credit. We briefly touched about waste and water management, right? And we've been talking about carbon footprints and emissions and scope one and scope two and scope three, right? Which is great. Now, if you've been following along, I presume you will understand when I mention what is scope one, what is scope two, right? Or carbon footprint or emission. Um, so what like greenhouse emissions, these kind of things. I hope by now you will have fairly decent understanding. So this module, right, the foundation of carbon accounting, we'll go a little bit further, right? We talk about uh, asset, stationary asset, moving asset, right? Kind of stuff, right? Just to give you an idea. And then we will look at, if you remember, when we looked at water management or waste, when we did a generate waste option where there was an option to select electric energy base, right? So how to calculate energy base where which is often calculated based on the data set. Usually, net zero comes with a pre-configured US based data, but you can obviously configure your country based. That's totally possible. So in this episode, what I'm going to do, right? I'll just want to briefly touch upon, so I can create a foundation, then we can, move forward. So the first thing first, right? If you're a business, right? Let's say, like I always give an example of my company, right? We at Inspirate the Solution, we have a clear goal of getting net zero by 2030, right? And we are very uh, strict about that, right? And so to achieve that, we have to measure our carbon footprint, or have to measure the the emission value, or we have to measure, quantify, and measure uh, the amount of emission we as a business is contributing. Obviously, we don't deal any sort of manufacturing. We are not a oil industry. We are not a textile industry. We are a software company. But that being said, right, there are kind of emissions in the form of scope one or scope two, right? You just need to pay attention to that. Um, so the main intention is to reduce the carbon footprint, right? Now, how to do that? To do that, you have to measure, right? So without measuring, you can't really, set a target to offset the carbon emission, right? Because if you are not aware what is your current level, then how are you going to work towards achieving to zero, right? So to keep that into consideration, one thing I just wanted to mention: if you're going to use net zero, everything is almost converted or measured in metric tons of carbon dioxide. So it's kind of um, equivalent of carbon dioxide measurement. Any kind of gas you take, right? Methane or whatever other gas, right? It's all will be measured with respect to carbon dioxide emission. So that's something you should keep into consideration. Okay. Now, when we talk about emission, right? Obviously, emission is a big part when it comes to climate change, right? That's the reason why we are even talking about it. If there's no emissions, right, there won't be any climate change, right? So I'm not talking about the natural emission. There are a lot of things which happens naturally, which we can't do much about it, right? Because obviously, when nature creates something, it creates in equilibrium, right? So when human equation is put into place, humans started to create imbalance in that equation, right? Start creating entropy in that equilibrium, and that's the whole crux of the problem, right? Because we as a civilization fail to understand that simple equation of equilibrium. Instead, we are contributing towards more entropy, means adding more problem to the rather than solution. So that's the reason why we're even talking about climate change in today's time, right? So for that, emission sources are very important, right? There are three kinds of emission source we're going to look at it. One is the your stationary asset, like your building, office building, data centers, warehouse, inventory places, whatever you wanted to call it, right? So these can contribute. I mean, I'm not saying building as such will contribute, but obviously, if you work in a building, you will have electricity consumption. So that's the energy consumption. You will have water waste. You will be using natural gas. So that's another kind of emission, right? Then you have vehicle asset emission, your company vehicle, or you have a, let's say, you have a private jet, right? Or sorry, private six-seater plane. So that even contribute. Like, I mean, I don't own a flight. I mean, though my partner, she talked about we should buy a six-seater plane, but six-seater plane. Someone who talks about climate change is not really good look. I'd go and buy a six-seater plane, right? First of all, the six-seater plane will cost at least maybe more than $1 million, and then I I need to get the flying license. I know a bit how to fly because I've done some flying training in New Zealand, so I can I can fly a six-seater if I have to. Um, but that being said, I don't want to contribute towards that climate change, right? Unless we have an alternative, maybe an electric vehicle, electric flight. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really looking forward to that. So I'm just giving an example. A couple of CEOs I know they own eight-seater planes, so it is possible that you know uh, that most of the business owners they will be using their private vehicle. Some use a boat, right? Yacht, whatever they call. Um, I don't own any boat. I'm not interested to live in the water. On water, sorry. Inside the water, that would be good if you have a data center built inside. I guess I don't know how true it is. Somebody's told me Switzerland has underwater stuff, something, right, where there are buildings inside the lake. I'm not sure. I mean, I can't really verify that. Someone from Switzerland might know something in that inside the lake there is some kind of. I don't know if it could be a conspiracy. I don't know. Um, Anyways, then we have scope three emissions. So we talk about something which you don't have control over, it, right? But say, for instance, you go and stay in a hotel, or let's say you're using public transportation, or using shuttle to go from hotel to airport, or you buying, say, raw materials, right? So that could be categorized under scope three activities. Okay. So these are the three main emission sources you have to pay attention to. So the reason why we are talking about it, it's all contribute to when it comes to carbon accounting. So it's important that you understand these terms very well. Then we have energy use records, right? So it's like how much energy your building or your company consume from this period to this period, right? So that can be measured and stored in net zero cloud. Emission factors your energy consumption into CHG emission. Like I said, everything is measured in CHG emission, like carbon dioxide equivalent emission. So, and I also mentioned, if you remember, that we have pre-configured data set which helps you calculate the emission value, the right emission value. For instance, Net Zero Cloud, they provide us with especially in the trial org, right, which I have at this stage, it usually contains, Northern American data, right? I'm not from Northern America. I'm from New Zealand. So if I wanted to do that, I need to get the New Zealand data, right? So there is an option which you can configure it. So and then you have carbon footprint, right? It's amount of the carbon dioxide that's released to the to atmosphere during the life cycle of product. Could be you're working in a manufacturing company, or you're working in a nanotech firm, or you're working in say for instance, prosthetic manufacturing company, or bionic arms, or you're working in a facility where it uses say space shuttles or whatever, right? So these things contribute to the carbon footprint. Do you think that the space project will be doing NASA is doing or SpaceX is doing does not contribute to carbon footprint? They contribute a hell lot of carbon footprint. So because of the products they're manufacturing, and have you seen when the rocket takes off, right? How much gas it releases, right, to the atmosphere? So, so a lot of fact. Yes, space travel or space research comes with a price, So people don't. It's not only the monetary value, but the price towards our atmosphere. So just remember that, right? When you advocate for the space research, which is great, I personally believe that space research should be encouraged, because we should be able to explore, other parts of our solar system to see, or maybe we should be able to find uh, reach beyond our solar system to see if there is a planet which hosts life. I'm pretty sure there must be different planets in a Milky Way galaxy that host life, not exactly the way which we are used to, not someone like human looking, maybe a bacteria or a tiny, but you can't see. Or what if there are energy source which you can't see through your eyes, right? Because our understanding of life is just based on the carbon material what we made from, right? Carbon is in abundance. It could be possible there might be, insect-looking creatures, or I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating, right? I have no proof. I haven't seen one. I mean, if you consider cockroaches an alien, well, so we already have that on planet Earth. But whatever, right? Sorry, I digress. So just okay. So what I'm trying to say, right? If your carbon footprint is one of the things you should measure as a part of business to achieve the net zero, and then carbon asset footprint that's based on the stationary asset. It gives you a summarized version of the carbon footprint for a single fuel type, right? It takes the fuel type, different types of the carbon footprint, and summarized into a single one. The same goes with the vehicle one, right? The same goes with the scope 3 carbon footprint. So I hope that's clear. If it's confusing, just give me a shout. Uh, you know, if you're never done this kind of things, I do get it, right? It gets confusing. It gets a bit interesting at the same time, right? But it's just your high school chemistry and science. That's pretty much it. So yeah, and then if you look at the building blocks for carbon accounting, so this is something you can look at it. Emission source. There are two kinds you mentioned. Um, he means Sam. Example as part of Trailhead. Um, Stationary asset, vehicle asset, energy type, carbon footprint, right? These are the things you have to remember. Emission source, energy use type, carbon footprint type. Three things, keep that into mind, right? Because we will be using this a lot in our upcoming episode. Okay, so now let me ask you this, right? We've reached to this stage. If you, as a consultant, want to take net zero cloud to business, how are you going to do it, right? So obviously, right, the first thing I'm going to tell you, right, if you are going to demo this net zero cloud to customer, you need to understand the customer net zero requirement first. That's very important. You need to understand the problem they're facing. Are they really capturing emissions anywhere? Are they using Excel document? If they're not doing pretty much nothing, if not doing anything about it, then you need to start from the square one. You need to have a conversation with them. Hey, how are you going to achieve the net zero? What about the waste management? What about the water management? What about the carbon credits? Are you planning to invest in any carbon project? Okay, so if the business says I have no idea, then you have to explain to them. Then that's why you have to explain to them the source of emissions, right? Okay, they will say what kind of emission is it? And you have to say, hey, your building, your energy use, your gas use, right? Your waste from your building, right? The paper waste which goes to landfill, right? It generates the methane gas. Okay, so how much you're contributing to that, and your vehicle in the in the garage, like your bike or your do you own a plane, right? These kind of questions you should be asking your customer, right? If you're going to, okay, so how are you planning to capture it? Okay, so that's where the net zero comes in handy. So you capture all that information at one place, and you can see the reporting using net zero Einstein analytics, or right. So yeah, that's how you take it forward, right? Because it's very important. Remember this, right? Salesforce is just a tool, nothing else, right? We are here to solve a business problem, and the business problem is client want to achieve net zero by certain year. And can Salesforce achieve that? That's the question you should be answering with the customer. So remember that one. Okay. So that's the reason why we are learning net zero. not for getting job, because only one person. Like there was I tell you one, one more thing, right? I don't want to drag this video too much, but just wanted to tell you one last thing. I know this recruiter. Maybe I might have mentioned, right? Recruiter in Australia, Ben, pretty awesome guy. He recruits uh, for Salesforce people in Australia. So I talk to him here and there at times. So he did send me the survey of ANZ Salesforce survey, right? So depending upon the cloud technology which is in use, so Service Cloud, Sales Cloud usage is pretty much about 90%, and then you have MuleSoft, and then you have other clouds, right? Revenue Cloud, I'm not pretty sure. Then you have different tech like CPQ, Marketing Cloud. So CPQ is in the Marketing Cloud. So Marketing Cloud is not too much, but I mean it's less than. It's not. Uh, it's not 90%. It's quite lower, I would say. But when it comes to net zero, it's just 1%. Imagine that, right? Because people are not aware. Plus, this tech is new, right? That's one thing. So now as a climate change guy, I look at a problem, a serious problem businesses is facing. They're struggling to get net zero. They don't know how. And that's where the Salesforce comes in the picture, right? And if you're already using Salesforce, why not use the net zero cloud, right? To capture your stuff around emissions, right? And then set a goal to achieve net zero. That's how you do it. That's how you sell a product, right? I'm not a salesperson, but I sell stuff for my business. But in general, I'm talking, right? This is how you can convince customer why they should be considering net zero, right? Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover in this episode. I hope you guys have an amazing Wednesday. Adios.